We went out for dinner last night with Mum and Dad. While we were waiting for the food to arrive, I went quiet. He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I'm trying to remember how my sermon starts." "Why do you need to know that now?" I said, "Well, I'd just like to mull it over in my mind, and I can't remember how it starts. I can remember the afternoon one, but I can't remember the morning one." And I said, "Well, you've got notes at home, you'll be all right." I said, "Yeah, but I like to have it there, because sometimes you get good ideas and things like that." But there we go. So I haven't got any good ideas to start with. But what we're talking about, we've been looking at the life of Abraham. This is our penultimate session. You don't know what that means? Make a note of it. Look it up when you go home. Looking at the life of Abraham. But the whole point is not just to learn a history lesson about somebody who lived about 4,000-ish years ago, about 4,000 miles away. Not just to learn a sort of history lesson on somebody, but to learn lessons from his life about how we can be fruitful. What does that mean? Produce actions. That's good, isn't it? You panic then, didn't you? You think, oh, you've been banging on. I know you like to think I'm banging on about things, but you've been banging on about fruitfulness. We didn't know there was going to be a test. We'd have paid attention. Okay, it's about your actions. It's about having a positive impact on other people for the glory of God and the building of His kingdom. Because you're not just called to be a part of a church group so that you can have a good sing-song now and then, meet some friends, go out on canal boat trips, and sneak out a free glass of wine occasionally. It's not about that. It's about being a part. The whole point of meeting here and not in the church building is about being the body of Christ all the time, being church all the time, not just clocking on and off for a couple of hours on a Sunday, being church all the time and making a difference where God has placed you, a difference for good. We can all make a difference. Sometimes it's not for good. We're talking about a positive impact on other people that glorifies Jesus. That's what we want to do. And I hope for those of you who've been through most of these sessions on the life of Abraham or caught up on the video channel or anything else like that you have learned something from the life of Abraham. Before we look at Abraham, we're going to read together this verse from Jeremiah chapter 17. A couple of verses there. Let's read this out loud together. "Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in Him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit." Wouldn't that be great? To never fail to bear fruit. And it's all to do with those things. Roots. And so far as we've looked at the life of Abraham, the sort of last 50 years of his 125 years of living, what's he been doing so far? A lot of the time he's been waiting, travelling, wandering around. God said to him long ago, he said to him, "I want you to leave." 50 years previously, approximately, he said, "I want you to leave the city." People were starting to settle in cities. They said, "I want you to leave the city." But everyone settles in a city. It's what we do. It's the trendy thing. God says, "No, I don't want you to be like everybody else. I want you to leave where you are and go to somewhere else. Somewhere where you will be a blessing. You will be blessed and you will be a blessing to the whole world." So he left and he moved thousands of miles from Babylonia to what we call the Promised Land, Israel, that land. A land he'd never seen. He couldn't look it up on Wikipedia to see what the climate was like. He didn't know what to pack. He just took everything he had, left the rest of his family behind, took his wife, his nephew Lot, and a few possessions he had, and he went off and travelled to this land. And when he got there, he built an altar, and then he moved somewhere else, and then he built another altar, and then he moved somewhere else, and then drought came, and then he moved into Egypt, and God didn't tell him to do that, and he had some trouble, and he had to come back to the Promised Land, and he went through this whole process of wandering around. And God said, while he was there, he said, I'm going to bless you. You're going to have numerous descendants. More than you can count. And Abraham's thinking, well, that's good, because we haven't got any yet, and I'm already knocking on quite a lot. And God says it's going to happen. And not only that, but your descendants are going to occupy this land as far as you can see. He says, well, I don't own anything. I've got a tent. He says, you're going to own the land, but other people own this land. But you're going to own it, and your descendants are going to own it. And Abraham trusts God's promises. And God provides, eventually, at the young age of 100, he and his wife finally have their first son together. And God fulfills that promise. And we're going to go on and look in Genesis 23 and see how they're living out in their retirement. When Sarah was 127 years old, she died in Kiriath Arba, better known as Hebron. Does anybody have a Bible open or with them at Genesis 23, looking at a different translation? Do you remember the days when people used to bring Bibles to church services and gatherings? It's all that I spoil you, make it too easy, don't I? But my dad's brought one because he's old school. But which version's yours then?
NLT.
Okay, well what does yours say for verse 2?
Verse 2.
You've got one that's sort of goes into
Yeah.
She died at Kiriath Arba, now called Hebron.
Alright, yours says Hebron as well, okay? Alright, we'll come back to that. In the land of Canaan. After Abraham had mourned for her, he went to the Hittites, they're the people who lived in the land, and he said, I live as a foreigner in your land, and I don't own any property where I can bury my wife. Please let me buy a piece of land. Sir, he answered, you are an important man. Choose the best place to bury your wife. None of us would refuse you a resting place for your dead. Abraham bowed down, not bad for 120 old, whatever he is, years old here. I said, help me up. And replied, if you are willing to let me bury my wife here, please ask Zohar's son Ephron to sell me Machpelah Cave, which sounds like it's in Scotland, at the end of his field. I'll pay what it's worth, and all of you can be witnesses. Ephron was sitting there near the city gate, that's where they met together, when Abraham made this request. And he answered, Sir, the whole field, including the cave, is yours. With my own people as witnesses, I freely give it to you as a burial place for your dead. Once again, Abraham bowed down and said to Ephron, in front of these witnesses, I offer you the full price so I can bury my wife. Please accept my offer. But sir, the man replied, the property is worth only 400 pieces of silver. Why would we haggle over such a small amount? Take the land, it's yours. Abraham accepted Ephron's offer and paid him the 400 pieces of silver in front of everyone at the city gate. The witnesses, they saw him pay for it. That's how Abraham got Ephron's property east of Hebron, which included the field with all of its trees, as well as Machpelah Cave at the end of the field. So Abraham buried his wife Sarah in Machpelah Cave that was in the field he had bought from the Hittites. Exciting stuff, isn't it? So what have we learned? How does that help us in our quest to be fruitful? Just going to unpack it a little bit. So this is, I don't know how well you can see that from the cheap seats at the back, but what we've got here is, this is the whole area sort of summed up. So over that way is where Abraham started off, moved around, came into this land which is blown up in this bit here. There's Hebron, that area where he settled down, so to the southern part of the land that God had promised him, moving around in that place. Now in verse, in fact I'm just going to go back a bit. See that word there? Hebron. Okay. In other translations, you'll find it's called, you'll be excited about this, I can tell, Mamre. And you're going, We remember Mamre, don't we? We've heard of that before. It's come up a few times in the life of Abraham. You do remember, don't you? You were paying attention to that. Yeah. Of course. Thanks, Malcolm. Well done. Brownie points for your team. So what are we going to learn from this? How can we live this fruitful life? First thing is, we've got to dwell in the place of promise. This place, Mamre, occurred in chapter 13, verses 14 to 18. The trees of Mamre are mentioned there. And that's a place where God met with Abraham and promised him the land. First of all, he told him when he was over in Babylon, he says, go to a land that you've never seen. When he gets there, he's in this place, and he has another encounter with God at the trees of Mamre, and God says, this land is going to be yours. Comes up again in chapter 18, as you all remember, where God reveals his timing for the promise. Abraham's waiting for this son to come. And he's by the trees of Mamre where three visitors appear. And one of them is the Lord. Or all three of them are the Lord. Or anyway, the Lord is there, okay? Because it's not quite clear. But the Lord comes, and Abraham, as a good Middle Eastern host, he welcomes them in. He says, come into my tent, let me make you a cup of tea and a biscuit and give you the best hospitality we've got. And God's accepting this, and then he says to him, this time next year your wife's going to be pregnant, by the way. She's going to have a son. And Sarah is in the back of the tent because that's the custom. They're separated from the men, and she laughs because she's listening, like a good wife listening in case they need more sugar or anything for the tea. And she hears this, and she got out laughing because she's like 90 odd at the time, and she's never had any children, and she just finds the whole idea ridiculous. At the trees of Mamre, God reveals the timing. Abraham has been waiting for God to fulfill this promise for about 25 years. God, you said it's going to happen. When is it going to happen? Is it going to happen now? Can't see any signs of it happening, Lord. Lord, do you remember that promise you made? God's timing. Dwell in the place of promise. If we want to be fruitful, we've got to place ourselves where we can hear God's word and receive his vision. We need to place ourselves where we can hear God speak to us, where we can see the vision that he's got for our lives. And if you can't hear that, and if you're not in the right place, you will never hear it. You might need to move yourself physically. You might need to move yourself mentally. Change your mindset. You might need to let go of things that you're holding on to. You might need to move socially, leaving one group of people that are holding you back and moving to another one where you can grow and flourish. But whatever it is, if you want to hear God, you've got to get to the place of promise. And that's where you can be fruitful. If we've wandered from it, we need to get back there quick. It may involve a move physically, relocating, reattending somewhere you stopped going to. It might mean mentally changing our way of thinking. Instead of thinking negatively, thinking positively about things. It might mean socially, the relationships we have or the people we meet with. We might need to cut ourselves off from them and get to the people where we can grow, the people that are going to nurture us and help us. And spiritually, maybe some spiritual disciplines we've let slip. If you're not spending any time in prayer, if you're not spending any time in quiet with the Lord, if you're not spending any time looking at his word, don't complain that God's not speaking to you. Has anyone still got a landline at home? We've got a landline at home. We've got mobile phones that we use all the time. We've got a landline. If it rings, we just look at it.
It's usually us.
Who's ringing that? And we ignore it. We never answer the landline. We think, we've got an answer machine on it, they'll leave a message. Alright, but there's no point Ellen and I complaining that nobody ever speaks to us on our landline if we never pick it up. Is there? Don't complain that God's not speaking to you if you never put yourself in a place where you can hear the voice of God. Because, heads up, He wants to speak to you. He's a God who communicates. He's got so much He wants to speak into your life and over your life. He's got so much, He's got plans for you that He wants to lead you into so that you can be blessed and you can bless other people. So you've got to get yourself in the place where you're going to hear the voice of God. And be ready for it. And when it comes, take hold of the vision. For the first time, we see Abraham investing. So he's been a stranger for about 50 years. That's a long time to be the new boy. Mum and Dad over from North Wales, I think it was Dad, said, do you feel like you're part of the area now? I said, no. We don't. We don't feel like part of it. It feels like home. But a friend of mine who's lived here a lot longer than me, it's his church I'm preaching in Filey this afternoon, he said to me, you know, people around here won't consider you belong until you've got about 3 generations in the cemetery, you know, and then you're no longer the new people, the incomers, you know, you'll be part of the community. So, not worried about that. We know spiritually this is where we belong, this church family is where we belong, and so, you know, that's important. But Abraham has been the new boy for 50 years. He now becomes, for the first time, the owner of some land. Not much, a plot of land. He hasn't conquered a nation. He hasn't established a kingdom. He owns a plot of land with a cave in it and some trees. Abraham puts a marker down. He says this is the first bit of the fulfillment of the promise of God. That's what he's doing when he buys that land. When Ellen and I first got married, we lived in a town in North Wales called Prestatyn. We bought our first house together. We decorated it the way we wanted it to look, not caring about what other people thought. It was our house. This was where we were going to live together until we died. That was it. We planted trees in the garden because we wanted to see these trees grow. We had long-term plans to be in that house. 7 years later, God said, move to Rill. So we sold the house in Prestatyn. We moved to Rill. We never planted any trees.
We did in pots.
We planted trees, quite right, we planted trees in pots. And somehow, I don't know, we weren't aware of it, but maybe we knew that we were going to be moving again. I once heard a preacher say, a guy who had a great influence on my life, I remember him saying that in the front of his Bible, he had his address written down in pencil. Because he knew at any point God could tell him to move somewhere else. So he was not putting down roots. He was ready to move. Just want you to know, Ellen and I haven't planted any trees yet, but we're planning to. Oh, I beg your pardon, thank you, Ellen. We have planted trees. Our intention is to put down roots and to be established here. When we start digging them up, we'll let you know. But Abraham was told he bought this land. Buying it was part of the investment for the future. It's staking a claim in the promise of God. It's quite significant. It might have sounded, as we read through that chapter, like just a little bit of domestic history. Sad, nobody went on when Sarah died, but sad that she's gone. Abraham's all alone.
Oh.
Thank you. But there's more to it than that. There's lessons to be learned from it. God is recording this in His Word for us to learn lessons. Abraham was going to be fruitful. He made a claim in that land. The other thing you might have noticed was he used his own resources. Did you notice how much they wanted to give him the land? Just take it. You're honoured. We all respect you. We wouldn't deny you this plot of land, even the owner of it, because it's all right for everybody else to say, "Oh, you can have it for free," and the owner's going, "You've been very generous with my land." But even the owner of the land says, "Yeah, I would be thrilled if you would accept it as a gift from me." And Abraham says, "No, I'm going to buy it. God is the one that's blessing me. God is the one that is driving my work. God is the one that is going to make me fruitful. I am going to use my God-given resources to buy this land." Nobody's going to say, "Look how well Abraham's doing. He'd be nowhere without me." Nobody's going to be able to say that. God is using, Abraham is using his own resources to take hold of the vision. And he sets down roots. It was the usual practice, just put that word, establish yourself where God has placed you. It was the usual practice for people to die and to be taken to be buried with their fathers. Everyone would have expected at this point Abraham, however old he was, to get his bus pass out and take Sarah's body back to Babylonia, where they came from, to bury her in the family tomb. That was the tradition. Abraham's saying, "We belong here. This is where God has put us. This is where I'm setting down my roots. This is where I'm planting my wife's body. This is where we belong." Establish yourself where God has placed you. Don't go looking for something else. Don't live your life waiting for something else. This day too is important. The home you live in, the job you go to, the school you're in, the clubs you belong to, it's all part of God's plan. He has placed you there for His purpose. So don't go waiting for, when we retire we're going to do this. One day I'll move to such and such. One day I'll start doing this. What about today? Which is why we say as a church, even though we've come out of that building, and keep praying for that the sale to go through and everything else, even though we've come out of that, it's not like one day we'll be a church again. In the meantime, this is us. No, this is the church. And as I was saying to somebody just earlier, we're more of a church now than when we were in the building. And maybe there will be a building in the future. I don't know. What's important is, what is God doing today? Is He building His kingdom in us and through us today? And if God is doing that, then throw yourself into the work of God. Let's not sit around waiting for what may or may not happen in the future. As a church and individually, establish yourself where God has placed you. Don't go looking for something else. Keep looking forward, not backward. Abraham has caught a glimpse of something better yet to come. He may not see the fulfillment of the promise that God has made. He owns a few acres of land. But he knows that God is going to give to his family a whole of that land. He's got a glimpse of it. He's trusting God for it. He may or may not see it with his own eyes. The reality is, God is going to keep his promise. So, where are you called to set down your roots? Without roots we die. Without roots we don't belong. You've seen those films of the desert places. If you watch the old western films, you see a ghost town. They have the tumbleweed that gets blown through. It doesn't have any roots. It's dried up into like a ball of desiccated, that's the right word, isn't it? Not desecrated. Desiccated tree or shrub, and the wind blows it and it just rolls and rolls and rolls. Wherever the wind blows, it goes. Eventually, by the way, it does set down roots. It's its way of distributing itself. But some people are just like that. On a whim, they'll go somewhere. On a whim, they won't go anywhere. They'll just move around through life, never getting involved, never connecting with anybody or anything, just drifting through. Connecting involves commitment, and it comes at a cost. It costs you to get involved with other people, because they might make demands on your time. They might want to spend time with you. They might want you to spend time with them. They might want you to help them in some way. Better to keep your distance. Life's a lot easier if you don't connect with anybody. Just drift wherever the wind takes you. If you want to be fruitful, get connected. Set down roots. Become established where the Lord has placed you, and see what He is going to do in you and through you. You're called to be a blessing. You are the light of the world, said Jesus. Shine in the darkness for His glory. Amen. Lord, we choose your way, not ours. We choose what you want for us, not what we choose for ourselves. We surrender our plans, our comfort, our well-being, our visions, and embrace yours. Lord, your ways are better than our ways. Your ways are higher than our ways. We want you to be glorified. Help us to establish roots where you've placed us. Lord, for those of us that are in the wrong place, challenge us to move to the right place, whatever move that is, so that we can set down roots in the place of promise and blessing for your glory. And Lord, it's your kingdom we seek to build. Thank you for the privilege of being called into partnership with you for this great work. Have your way in us, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.